To answer both of your questions, so Pete says, does it work evenly good? Does it work evenly well? Yes, I think that the combined air and the separate air work equally well. So the way that came about, it was a few years ago on Donkey's board, and there was a fella building a door, and he had really good metalworking skills, and he built one big air setting and had the secondary air behind it. And that was when Peter started to refine that inner flange and come up with the threshold. He had some parameters. I'm not sure if he still uses them in the plans, but with regards to height of the threshold and secondary air, primary air coming in and hitting secondary and pushing up over. And while that was all in development, we were all sort of working on that together. And so actually, Tall Shadow, for a few years now, my plans have incorporated that same system, but I have only built doors for myself, and so they're all smaller doors, and so they incorporate the dual air system. But in the plans, I'm using larger off-the-shelf doors made by Pisla in Finland, and those have, an air inlet that is the right size for the sum of the air. So in my plans, I do a combined port. So, Pete, your question is, do they work equally well? Yes, I think they do. I think that the combined port is a little bit easier to control. You control them both at once. Peter is of the opinion, and I tend to agree, that as you close that down, as the thing's burning hotter, it's going to prioritize the secondary air, since the air coming in is cooler than the air inside the firebox. So that air will sink to the bottom, which is where the secondary air's intake is, and then the excess will kind of blow over the top of the fuel and be the primary air. So it's kind of a self-limit, or a self controls the ratio between primary and secondary sort of automatically. As you close it down and the stove becomes starved for air, it starts to prioritize secondary air, just due to the nature of the temperatures and the stratification going on in there. Hey Jacob, nice to see you too. So that's the biggest difference between the primary and secondary really is just, or by having a single or dual controls, is that with having that single door control, you just have a much easier, it's just a single thing to control. Now in my stoves, I actually don't really close the secondary air. I think you might have gotten that backwards. I close the primary air. I may have said it backwards, but I tend to close the primary air, and I do it. You said there was no flaps or anything. I just use a plug. I've got a little piece of ceramic fiberboard that I cover with that foil tape, like flue tape, and that just makes a nice little plug that doesn't, the tape keeps it all so it doesn't dust. And that's just been easier for me. I've built sliders in the past, and sometimes they get, there's different kinds and hot, and I just have my simple aluminum door on there, and so I've just been using a plug. Now, like I said, in my plans, I recommend, since metalworking is kind of like fine metalworking is beyond most people's skills. I can cobble together a reasonable door. If I really work on it, it could come out okay, pretty nice. But it takes a bit to build a real good door. So my plans have those pre-built doors, and so they use, since I'm limited on what their air intake is, I have to, I adjusted to make sure that it's a dual air intake. Hey, David Swanson, welcome. So I hope that maybe those answers you think. So basically, let me just sum that up. I don't think there's a significant performance difference in terms of one makes the stove run better or not, or more flexible. They don't really offer too much of that, although my dual, supposedly there's more flexibility, I guess, with two inputs, but I don't use them that way because I always leave my secondary air open. It would be prudent to plug it when it was out all the way, but I just never do. So.